Welcome to Hush and Hunger. You won't know what you crave until it speaks. Now, don't speak. Just listen. The dark is already listening to you.
Where the Rain Remembers You. Chapter 1. It started with rain, not the kind that soothes, the kind that insists. A downpour that presses itself against the glass. Heavy, constant, like breath too close to your skin. Elias hadn't planned to stop. But when he saw the sign, half-lit and flickering, Rain Hotel, something inside him shifted. He didn't decide to turn in. He simply did. The road behind him was gone, swallowed by fog. The gravel lot was empty. Or maybe not. Something glinted in the mist. Taillights, maybe. Or a memory rising through the haze. He stepped out of the car. Rain slicked across his skin in an instant, cold and close, as if it had been waiting for him. The building rose out of the dark, 3 stories high, balconies rusted into delicate shapes. Windows glowed faintly behind curtains, not flickering, breathing. He reached the front door, didn't knock. It opened before he touched it, quietly, almost like a sigh. The lobby was warm, too warm, velvet chairs without dust, a chandelier that didn't sway but hummed gently. The air smelled of old wood, faded perfume, and something saltier, closer to skin. Behind the front desk stood a woman, tall, still. Her presence more than her figure. She looked at him with eyes that seemed to already know him. "Welcome, Mr. Marr," she said, handing him a brass key. "Room 305. He hadn't told her his name, hadn't asked for a room. The key was heavy and warm, as though someone else had just let it go. He turned to head upstairs, and behind him, soft as breath, a voice he couldn't place, whispered, "Finally." The stairs curved gently upward, carpeted deep green, worn soft by years of footsteps he couldn't hear. The wallpaper caught the light in places, old silver threads woven through age-darkened cream. The banisters smelled faintly of lemon oil and damp. On the 3rd floor, the hallway bent where it shouldn't, longer than it looked from below, quieter than any building should be. Room 305 waited at the end. The door was already open, just an inch. He paused. The air on the threshold was warmer than the hallway, like someone had only just exhaled. He stepped inside. The room was modest, quiet. A tall bed with iron posts neatly made, a writing desk, a large window covered in sheer fabric showing nothing but a blur of fog. The wallpaper here shimmered too, but only when he didn't look directly at it. He placed his key on the nightstand, then realized he hadn't brought a bag. The scent in the room settled around him, lavender faint but real, underneath the sharper edge of sea salt, and deeper still, warmth. The kind of warmth a room holds after someone has left the bed, or hasn't. He stepped into the bathroom. The light buzzed softly, then settled. A towel hung neatly on the rack, folded, fresh, but still damp. It smelled like lavender soap and something else, something faintly familiar. He touched it, slowly, and the sensation that moved through him wasn't from the towel. It was memory. Elias sat on the edge of the bed, not undressed, not relaxed, just still. His hands rested on his thighs, his eyes fixed on the slightly open door. Outside, the rain softened. It didn't stop. It simply quieted, like someone leaning in, waiting for him to speak first. Somewhere down the hall, a door opened, and then gently, it closed. Not with urgency, with intention. The bedside clock glowed red in the dark. 3:15 a.m. He hadn't looked at the time before, hadn't felt sleep coming. But now, the sheet behind him tugged, barely, The kind of pull that happens when someone settles in beside you, when the mattress adjusts to a second body. He didn't turn. He didn't need to. The pillow beside him carried a scent that wasn't his. Faint, unmistakable. Naomi. The way she used to smell after a day by the sea, salt in her hair, lavender on her wrists. He closed his eyes. Not from tiredness, from instinct. And just before the darkness took him, he heard it. A melody. Low. Private. A tune only the two of them had known, hummed not in his memory, but in his ear, as if someone beside him had never stopped singing it. Chapter 2. The Towel That Wasn't Yours. Elias woke before the morning did. The light behind the curtains was the color of cold milk. Thin, gray, directionless. Rain still whispered against the window panes. Softer now, more deliberate. A rhythm that didn't match the wind. He sat up slowly. The other pillow beside him was flat. He touched it, cool now, but not untouched. There was an imprint, shallow, broad, and for a moment, he didn't move. Just watched the slow rise of mist behind the glass, as if something on the other side was watching back, waiting to see what he would do next. His chest was damp beneath his shirt, not sweat, and not entirely his own. The bathroom mirror hadn't fogged from the night's humidity. That, in itself, made him pause. Elias turned on the shower, let the steam fill the small room before stepping in. The water hit his skin with surprising force. Too cold at first, then too hot, then just right, as if adjusting to him, or testing him. He stood under the spray longer than necessary, long enough to feel clean. Or empty, he wasn't sure which. When he reached for the towel, it wasn't his. Softer, older. The fabric worn thin in places, like something washed 100 times and left to dry on a sun-warmed line. It smelled faintly of lavender soap, yes, but underneath, there was something else, something warmer, more human. He lifted the towel to his face, still warm, not from the radiator, from skin, not his. He let the cloth rest against his cheek, closed his eyes, and inhaled slowly. It didn't frighten him, but it didn't comfort him either. On the bathroom sink sat 2 toothbrushes, identical in shape, but not in use. One was dry, the other was not. He stared at them for a long time, unsure if this had been part of the room the night before. Certain only of one thing. Someone had been here, and not just in the room. In the rituals of it. The details, the intimacy. The mirror stayed silent, but in the window he caught the faintest suggestion of fog moving against the glass, from the inside. Elias didn't speak, not to himself, not to the room, but something inside him was already listening. He dressed without thought. The clothes folded at the foot of the bed weren't the ones he remembered wearing yesterday. They were softer, slightly too familiar, like something worn on a past version of himself he couldn't name. Downstairs, the hallway had changed. Sconces that had once cast warm amber light now glowed cooler, dimmer. The wallpaper at the stairwell had curled back at the edges, just slightly, as if something underneath had stirred overnight. He descended slowly. No footsteps echoed, no voices, just the low hum of rain against the windows and the quiet crackle of something unseen, like a phonograph needle, left hovering just above a record. The lobby was empty, the front desk unattended, but the coffee was fresh. He poured a cup without knowing why. Steam rose, fragrant and bitter, and beside the cup, set with gentle care, a second mug, already half full. Lipstick on the rim, deep red, slightly smeared. He froze, not with fear, with recognition. He lifted the cup. The ceramic was still warm. He didn't drink it, but he carried it with him. Back upstairs, back into the room that no longer felt like just a room. The bed had been made. His towel, the one he hadn't used, was gone. And on the pillow, his pillow this time, a single strand of dark hair, curled slightly, still damp. Not hers, not Naomi's, someone else, someone present. He stood at the foot of the bed and whispered barely aloud, "Are you here?" The window fogged over in reply. A small soft bloom of breath, inside the glass, then gone. Elias didn't leave the room for the rest of the day. Not out of fear, out of attention. He moved differently now. Slower, more aware. Every object he touched, every drawer handle, every stitch in the bedspread, felt like a conversation already begun. He opened the closet, empty, except the faintest trace of something, cedar and damp cotton. The memory of someone having stood there, just a moment before he arrived. He didn't check again. That evening, the rain thickened. It no longer tapped at the windows. It pressed, heavy, rhythmic, as though the sky had leaned in close, whispering something only the building could hear. Elias sat in the armchair near the window. He read nothing, drank nothing, just listened. And when he rose to undress, his shirt was already unbuttoned. He paused, fingers at the hem, his breath caught, not from surprise, but from how natural it felt, as though someone had been waiting for him to notice. He lay back on the bed, bare-chested. The air against his skin was warm, moved like breath. And beneath the pillow, something crinkled softly. Paper, a note, unfolded slowly, the ink barely dry. It read, "You slept so close last night. Tonight, try facing me. No name, no punctuation, no explanation. Just invitation." He looked toward the window. The fog was thicker now, and this time, the breath on the glass came from both sides. Chapter 3. The Bed That Breathes. The third night began without ceremony. Elias undressed slowly. The room felt warmer than before, though the radiator hadn't stirred. The rain no longer mattered. It had become part of the room's rhythm, like breath, like heartbeat, like the hush just before someone touches you. The bed was turned down again, neatly, intentionally. The sheets smelled faintly of skin, of lavender, and something else. Something like longing left too long between the folds. He lay on his side, not facing the door, not facing the window, facing the space beside him, the one that had been warm the night before. He closed his eyes, listened, and waited. The silence didn't stretch. It settled, around him, inside him. Then, the sheet shifted, not with weight, with intention, as if someone had entered the bed without touching it. A breath moved across the back of his neck, no sound, just heat. Then, closer still, a presence behind him, not flesh, not shadow, something that understood his shape and curved into it. His spine tightened, not with fear, with recognition. His lips parted, but he didn't speak. The air between his shoulder blades stirred, as if someone had leaned in to whisper, but said nothing. Still he heard it, a wordless knowing, like being read, not watched, understood without being named. He stayed still, even when the sensation drifted lower, to the dip of his back, the small space between his breath and his want. Something, not touch, not sound, unfolded there. Warm, unseen, and utterly aware. Elias didn't open his eyes. Somehow he knew that doing so would break something, an understanding, a rhythm, a breath not yet finished. Whatever lay behind him was already close, not with weight or touch, but with the unmistakable presence of attention. It wasn't watching him, it was with him, woven into the shape of the bed, pressed into the still warm curve between shoulder and spine. He could feel it, not the thing itself, but its awareness, its patience, its knowing. The air at his back thickened slightly, not cold, but charged. A warmth hovered at the base of his neck, and for a moment, it felt like a mouth had opened there. Parted lips, just shy of skin, breathing him in. He stayed still, not from fear, from curiosity, from the unfamiliar sensation of being chosen. The mattress shifted beneath his body, not sharply, not enough to startle, just enough to say, "You are not alone." A slow sinking give in the fabric, a whisper of movement that curved inward, as though someone or something was fitting itself against him, perfectly, deliberately. His heartbeat slowed, and then caught. He had forgotten what it felt like to be touched by something that wanted him simply because he was. Not for performance, not for comfort, but for presence. His hips remained still, but the skin there pulsed. Not from arousal, not yet, but from recognition. His muscles knew this rhythm, though his mind refused to name it. The air at his ear shifted again. Warmer now, closer. He didn't hear words, but something moved through him, low and steady, like a hum heard beneath the surface of water. Not thought, not voice. More like remembering how it feels to be needed. Elias turned, slow and careful, letting the sheets drag across his bare chest. He expected emptiness. But there, pressed into the mattress beside him, was an indentation, the shape of a shoulder, the hollow where a collarbone might rest. He reached out. His hand met air. But the air was warm, and the bed moved, not away, toward. The presence curved into his gesture, as though it knew exactly where his fingers would go, as though it had already memorized his longing. He closed his eyes again, this time not from fear or even surrender, but to feel more clearly, to let himself listen with his whole body. And there it was, a low exhale. Not his, a breath given, not taken, right beside his mouth. As though someone had leaned in, not to speak, but to wait for him to say yes. He didn't speak. There was no need. Every part of him that once needed words had quieted. The presence beside him moved, not closer, not away, but deeper, into the rhythm of the bed, into the space between his thoughts. It wasn't physical in the way a person is. It didn't press or hold. It nested, it learned, and it stayed. A warmth settled across his chest, low and steady, like the weight of an arm that wasn't there. His breath matched its pace without thinking. It felt like being rocked, like being remembered. He tried to turn fully, to face it, but the sheets resisted, not roughly, not to stop him, just enough to say, "Stay here." And so he did. His mouth parted. He wasn't sure if he meant to speak, to moan, or to pray. But nothing came. Only breath. Only the subtle pull at his lower belly. The tingling in his fingertips. That sweet, maddening tension before the first kiss that never comes. The clock on the nightstand blinked silently. 3:15 a.m. again. Always. He stared into the dark and felt it breathe around him. Inside him. The mattress pulsed faintly beneath his spine, as if the bed itself had a heartbeat now. A slow, grounded thrum that matched his own. He felt it behind his knees, along the slope of his thigh, beneath his ribs. The hush was absolute, and then the whisper. This time, he heard it, not outside, not across the room, inside. 3 words, spoken like silk dragged across skin. "You remember me." and with them came the heat. Not fear, not even arousal. Something older, something hungrier. Elias inhaled slowly and whispered back, barely audible, like a truth pulled from the root of his spine. I think I always did. Chapter 4. The corridor that loops. Elias woke with the strange certainty that something had changed. Not in the room, in the building. The rain had stopped. The silence that followed wasn't quiet. It was thick, as if the world outside had taken a long, slow breath and forgotten to release it. He rose from the bed carefully, listening to the floorboards as he walked. They gave no sound beneath his steps, not even a groan. It felt like walking across held breath. The hallway was darker than before, not dimmer, older. The sconces that had once glowed amber now flickered in a shade of silver that made the wallpaper look wet. And the wallpaper, God, the wallpaper, had begun to peel back in soft curling strips, not randomly, in lines, in patterns, as if something beneath had started to show itself. He turned left toward the stairwell, but it wasn't there. Only more hallway. He turned again, walked slower. The numbers on the doors had changed. 306, 307, 308, then 305 again. But it wasn't his door. The handle was different, and something cold swept over him. Not fear exactly, more like displacement, like being removed gently from the world you thought you belonged to. He kept walking, hand trailing the wall. It pulsed beneath his fingertips, not metaphorically, not emotionally. The wall was warm and moving, as if it recognized his touch, as if it had missed it. At the far end of the corridor, a door stood open. Inside, a faint light, golden, familiar. He stepped through just for a moment, just to see, and found himself back at the other end of the hall. Same floor, same peeling wallpaper, same breathless hush. Only now his room key was missing, and behind him, the hallway he had just walked down was gone. Only a door, closed, without a number. He didn't panic. That was the strangest part. The disorientation was complete, yes. The floor too long, the layout unfamiliar, the door behind him gone without a sound. But Elias didn't feel fear. He felt, anticipated, as if the building had only just now begun to open itself to him, and him alone. He walked. The corridor shifted subtly beneath his feet, so slightly that it might have been breath, or memory, or some deeper architecture rearranging itself around him. A turn he hadn't taken appeared to his right. A bend in the wall he swore hadn't been there a moment before, now curved like a shoulder leaning in. It smelled different here. The scent was deeper, darker, less lavender, more earth. Warm cedar, damp fabric, and beneath it, something unmistakably intimate, like someone had just dressed in this hallway, or undressed. He passed a mirror, not mounted, just leaning against the wall, cracked at one corner, with a fine dust of age along the edge. His reflection followed him faithfully for the first few steps. And then, it didn't. It lingered. Half a second behind, he stopped. So did it, but not at the same time. He lifted a hand, slow and deliberate. The reflection matched him. Almost. The fingers were right. The breath. The tilt of the head. But the eyes looked directly at him, not at the version of him standing in the hallway. At him. And they didn't blink. Elias turned away, kept walking. The corridor narrowed. The lights above flickered, not erratically, but in rhythm. A low pulse, almost a signal. Somewhere behind the walls, he could hear something moving, soft, steady, like bed sheets being drawn back, or skin shifting under someone else's hands. He stopped at the next door. No number. Just a brass handle shaped like an open palm. Warm to the touch. Too warm, as if someone had just let go of it. And when he opened the door, he smelled her. Not Naomi. Not entirely. But something that carried her shape, her breath, her heat. And it was waiting. The door closed behind him with a hush. No latch. No finality. Just a soft, sealed breath. The room was dim, but not unfamiliar. Same wallpaper, same window, same bed. But it wasn't his room. Not quite. The arrangement was reversed. The armchair now faced the wrong direction. The desk was on the left instead of the right. The curtains were drawn differently. And the bed had been slept in. Recently. The sheets were still creased where a body had turned. The pillows bore the faint impressions of a head, heavy, restless. A warmth still lingered in the fabric. That uncanny, unmistakable heat of someone who had only just left the room. Or worse, hadn't. He stepped toward the bed and sat, lowering himself as if not to disturb something invisible beneath the surface. His hand brushed the pillow beside him. There was a pulse there. Not a heartbeat, but a kind of rhythm. A quiet thrum just under the cotton, like fingers tapping from the other side of sleep. He lay back slowly. The ceiling was blank, but the air above him thickened, like someone leaned over him, watching, waiting. And then just behind his ear, a whisper, close. Low. You're walking in circles. He froze. His chest rose, slow and careful. He didn't answer. The voice was familiar, but not known. A woman's? Yes, but not Naomi. Not exactly. It carried her cadence, her warmth, but none of her restraint. Another breath followed, this time on his throat, wet. You'll never leave if you keep following your own footsteps. He turned toward the voice, but there was no one there, only his own reflection. In the window. But the glass didn't show the room, it showed the hallway. And in it, himself, still walking, still searching. Elias closed his eyes, and behind them, the walls kept turning. Chapter 5. The second room. He woke to the sound of dripping. Not water, not exactly. It was slower, heavier. The kind of sound that doesn't echo, but lands. He sat up in bed, eyes adjusting to a room that felt dimmer than before, though no lights had changed. Something about the shadows had thickened overnight. The corners no longer belonged to geometry. They belonged to suggestion. He swung his legs over the side of the mattress. The carpet was damp beneath his feet, but not cold. Warm, like a bath drawn hours ago, forgotten, left to cool, but never quite did. He stood, moved slowly. Every step brought the sound closer. Drip, drip, like something had soaked through from above or below or inside. He followed it. Not through the hallway this time. To the bathroom. The mirror was gone. In its place, a blank sealed panel. Pale wood, a little warped, and just beneath it, a small groove in the wall. A seam. Elias pressed his fingers against it. Felt it breathe? Not open. Not yet. But yield. He leaned in. The scent that drifted through that hidden seam was unmistakable. Not lavender this time. Not cedar. It was salt. Skin. Warmth. The scent of a body at rest. A body waiting. The panel gave way, and behind it, another room. Perfectly still. Perfectly made, but reversed. Not a mirror image. An echo. His breath caught in his throat. He stepped through the opening barefoot, the damp carpet giving way to cool tiles, and in the center of the bed, beneath the folds of a turned-down sheet, a shape, a body, still, facing away, the same slope of shoulder, the same dip at the spine. It was him, but not. and it was breathing. He didn't speak. There was no question to ask that hadn't already been answered in the shape of that body. He moved forward slowly, one foot after the other, as though stepping into someone else's memory, one he could feel along his skin but not yet name. The bed creaked faintly. The other him didn't stir. He, was lying on his side, back exposed to the room. The curve of the spine, the looseness in the shoulders, the way one hand rested palm up against the sheets, all of it painfully familiar. Not from watching, from inhabiting. It was his body, but emptied, or waiting to be filled. He sat on the edge of the bed, not close enough to touch. His presence alone shifted the weight. The mattress breathed beneath him, and then the breath behind him deepened. The other Elias exhaled, not with surprise, with welcome. His mouth went dry. His body pulsed, not in arousal yet, but in that strange, slow throb that lives in the gap between being looked at and being known. He reached out, almost without meaning to. His fingers hovered above the spine. The warmth was real, radiating. The skin wasn't damp, but it carried the memory of sweat, of closeness, of a need folded into the sheets, waiting to be unfolded again. The other him moved, just a little, not waking, not startled, but arching, barely, into the space between them, as if sensing the need and answering it. Elias's hand hovered, trembling. He didn't make contact, but the bed shifted as if he had, and in the silence that followed, he heard it, his own voice, whispered not from his throat, but from the shape beside him, software familiar, inevitable. It's not about touching. It's about being touched. He didn't pull his hand back, not fully. It hovered, suspended in the space between them, between skin and memory, between the body he thought he knew and the one that now breathed before him, slowly, deliberately. The other him turned, not abruptly, with care, a half roll in the bed, the sheets whispering down his hip, exposing the line of his ribs, his stomach, the hollow between collarbone and neck. Eyes opened, identical, but not equal. Elias found himself staring into his own gaze, soft, heavy-lidded, unbearably intimate, the kind of look you only ever catch in a mirror, just before you touch yourself and pretend you're not lonely. The other him didn't speak, but he smiled, faint, slow, like the smile wasn't meant for a face. It was meant for a body. Elias's mouth opened. A question hovered there, but language felt too sharp, too human. What he felt wasn't a thought. It was a draw, a pull, an invitation. The other Elias reached out, not to mirror him, to guide him. Their hands didn't meet, but the air between their fingers thickened, grew warm. The kind of warmth that exists only between two things with the same hunger, the same loneliness, the same understanding of how it feels to be left behind and want to be held for it. A noise rose in the room, not from the bed, from the walls, like breath in the walls. And through it, from behind him, a voice that didn't belong to either version of him, a woman's, low, wanting. Let him in. Elias turned, startled. No one was there. But when he looked back to the bed, the other him was gone. The sheet still held the shape of his body, and on the pillow beside it, damp with sweat, a handwritten note, 3 words, the ink smudged but legible. You've arrived twice. Chapter 6. The Sea Beneath the Floor. Elias woke with the feeling that something had shifted, not in his body, but beneath it. The sheets were dry. The room was quiet. But when he swung his legs over the edge of the bed, his feet met something soft and strange. The rug was damp, not soaked, but warm, and the kind of warm that made no sense at all. The rain had stopped sometime in the night. He could tell by the absence of rhythm against the windows. But the silence that followed felt thick, almost padded, like sound had been pulled from the room thread by thread. He stood, took a slow step forward. The floor gave under his weight, only slightly, but enough to feel it, enough to know it wasn't just water. It was something moving beneath the boards. He knelt without thinking, placed a hand to the floor. It was warm there too, like a bath that had been run hours ago, forgotten, left to cool. He pressed his ear to the wood and heard it, not a pipe, not the bones of the building shifting. Water, close, not rushing or gurgling, just lapping. A gentle measured sound, like waves in a hidden tide pool slipping against stone, and then beneath the sound, soft, nearly missed, his name, not spoken in the room, inside him, just once, and then again, a little fainter, a little deeper, and the second time, he recognized the voice. Naomi, not quite as she'd sounded when she was alive, not from memory, not from dreams, but from somewhere else, somewhere lower. He pushed himself up, heart knocking once, hard, then quiet again, walked to the window. Outside, the fog had started to lift, and what he saw made no sense. The ocean, dark and still, shimmered just beyond the glass, but not out there, not on the horizon. It was beneath him, not imagined, not metaphor. The sea was under the hotel, and it was rising. He didn't call her name, not aloud. There was no need. The air in the room had changed. He could feel it with every step. It clung to his arms, curled around his ankles. It wasn't cold. It wasn't warm. It was aware. The sound of water rose and fell beneath the floor, like a breath someone was trying not to take. He crossed the room, slowly. The wood underfoot creaked, not from age, but from reluctance, as if the building didn't want to bear his weight anymore, as if it had begun to remember something it had tried hard to forget. At the base of the far wall, near the foot of the bed, a seam had opened. He didn't remember seeing it before. A hairline crack between the boards, dark and inviting. He dropped to his knees, reached out, fingers brushing along the edge. It pulsed, just once, and then without any sound at all, the panel gave way. Behind it, another space, not quite a room, a crawl of hallway, short, low-ceilinged, barely wide enough for his shoulders. The walls were different here, warped with damp, covered in patches of old seaweed and something like velvet mold. The air smelled of brine and linen left too long to dry. He moved forward, hunched low. And then he saw it. Another room, smaller, stone-floored, carved out of the foundations like something older than the hotel itself. At the center, a tub? Or maybe a basin. He couldn't quite tell, but it was filled to the brim with black, still water. No ripples, no reflection, just depth, and floating in the water. Fabric. White. Thin. A nightgown. He stepped closer. The hem curled toward him, as though stirred by his presence alone. There was no light in the space? Not really. Just a soft silver glow that seemed to come from the water itself, and then a sound behind him. Software bare skin brushing stone. He turned. There she was. Naomi. Naked. Dripping. But not wet. She looked at him the way someone looks at a mirror that finally answers back. Not shocked. Not surprised. Just ready. She didn't speak, but her mouth parted slow and soundless, and somehow he understood. She hadn't come back. He had come down. She didn't move toward him. She didn't need to. Elias felt her presence reach across the space between them. Slow, patient, like warmth creeping through cold sheets. She stood in the water, or above it, or part of it. It was hard to tell. Her body didn't cast a reflection, but her eyes, they found him, and they held. Not like Naomi's used to, not with concern, not even with love, with knowing. Like she saw every version of him at once, grieving, wanting, empty, unfinished. She raised one hand, not high, just enough to offer. And Elias stepped forward. His body responded before his mind agreed. The room didn't echo. It absorbed sound. It drank it. The silence that followed was not absence. It was intimacy. The kind of hush that exists only between two people who are about to touch and know they never needed to ask. He reached for her, and the moment his fingers crossed the surface of the water, everything shifted. His knees gave slightly, not from weakness, from surrender. The air thickened, the water rose, not up his legs, but into him. Like breath being drawn in reverse, like memory filling marrow. His skin pulsed with the sensation of being touched everywhere at once, yet nowhere at all. She stepped closer. Her form never broke the water's surface. She simply arrived in front of him, so close now he could see the droplets clinging to her collarbone, the way her mouth curved. Not into a smile, but into permission. And then she spoke, not aloud, inside him. You weren't meant to lose me. His breath caught. You were meant to join me. And in that moment, Elias understood the sea wasn't rising. He was sinking, softly, willingly. And somewhere above them, the floor closed again, as if no one had ever passed through. Chapter 7. Check out or stay forever. The room above him no longer existed. He felt that in his bones, not in a metaphorical sense, in the literal ache in his knees, the damp chill in his ribs, the way his heartbeat no longer aligned with time but with something slower, deeper. Title: Elias stood waist deep in the black water, but he wasn't cold. The air clung to him like a second skin, warm and soft as breath. Naomi hadn't moved, or maybe she had. It was hard to tell where her body ended and the water began. He spoke her name. The sound didn't reach the air. It stayed in his mouth, heavy as honey. She looked at him, tilting her head slightly, not in question, but in recognition. Like he'd said something old, something remembered. And then she turned away. No splash, no ripple. She walked through the water and disappeared into the far wall, which was no wall at all, but a passage. Dark, worn, waiting. Elias followed. His steps didn't echo. They never had, not in this place. The hallway opened into another room, this one dry, quiet. Too quiet. It was the lobby, but wrong. The velvet chairs were dusted with ash. The chandelier hung lower than it should. The air smelled of wax and seawater. The front desk stood empty, except for a key. His key, room 305. He stepped closer. Beside the key lay a folded piece of paper and a small, brass bell. He reached out, picked up the note. No envelope, no name, just 7 words, written in Naomi's handwriting. You can leave if you forget. The bell gave a soft chime as he touched it. Behind him, a door opened. Fresh air, real, sharp, dry. The kind of air that belonged to the world before all this. His skin tightened, his chest rose. He could leave. All he had to do was stop remembering. He stood at the threshold for a long time, long enough to feel the difference between the air behind him and the air waiting ahead. Outside, it was crisp, real, filled with the distant texture of wind, the suggestion of voices, the hollow tap of the world moving on. familiar, but not his anymore. The door stood open, just a little, enough to tempt, enough to offer the illusion of choice. Elias could feel the draft brushing his skin, lifting the hairs along his arms. He could taste it, coffee, metal, morning. And still, he didn't move, because beneath his feet the floor felt different now. Not like wood, not like carpet. It felt like memory, software familiar, lived in a way his own home had never been. The rug under his toes seemed to hum faintly, as though his presence wasn't just allowed, but wanted, as though something beneath it recognized the weight of him and welcomed it. He looked down at the key still in his palm. Room 305, the same number, but it felt heavier now, warmer, like it had absorbed everything he had done in that room, every breath, every ache, every silence he hadn't dared speak into the dark. Next to the key, the paper, Naomi's handwriting. You can leave if you forget. No signature, no goodbye, just that one line, kind, cruel, true. His throat tightened. He didn't need to flip it over. He already knew there was nothing on the back. Because forgetting would mean letting go. Not of her. Not of the hotel. Of himself. Behind him, the wind stirred again. It carried the scent of pavement, wet leaves, something baking in a window. And yet, from somewhere deeper in the hotel, a sound rose. Faint. Distant. A bell. 3 soft chimes. The kind that didn't ask you to hurry, just to listen. He turned his head. The stairwell waited. Still, dark, patient. And as he stood there, in that almost moment of decision, something bloomed in his chest. Not fear, not longing. Recognition. The feeling of being known, not for who he'd been, but for what he was now. Something shaped by silence, by sleep, by surrender. He turned from the door, not quickly, but with a kind of relief. Because some places aren't meant to be left, and some promises don't sound like words at all. They sound like home. He climbed the stairs slowly, as if the walls had grown heavier. Or maybe it was just his body, no longer carrying memory, but becoming it. The 3rd floor welcomed him like a breath he hadn't known he was holding. The hallway stretched with soft light, the carpet pressing up to meet his feet like flesh. Room 305 stood open. Not just ajar, inviting. Inside, the candle still burned, and beside the flame, beneath the covers, Naomi, or the shape of her. She wasn't turned away this time. She was waiting. He crossed the room without hesitation. The silence didn't feel empty now. It felt expectant. Alive, like the room had drawn itself tighter, closer, just to witness this moment. He slipped into the bed beside her. Her eyes opened, and they were not the eyes he remembered. They were deeper, distant, pulling. She spoke, but not with her mouth. The air between them shifted, thickened. A voice rose in the walls, in her chest, in his own breath. You were never lost, only sleeping, only waiting to remember what wanted you. Elias didn't answer. He couldn't, but he felt her fingers close around his, slowly, as if sealing a vow he didn't need to speak. The bed grew warmer. The floor beneath them pulsed once, then again, and he understood. He had never checked in. He had always been here, waiting to be claimed. Naomi leaned close, not to kiss, to mark. Her lips brushed the space just above his heart and whispered, not into his ear, but into him. Say yes. He did. Not with words, with stillness, with breath, with the closing of his eyes, and the hotel at last sighed in relief. Outside, the storm began again. Inside, nothing moved, because he was home, and the house knew his name.
Mark on you. Then go ahead, subscribe to the channel. More seductive horror stories are waiting in the dark. Somewhere between desire and dread, a voice is already whispering your name. Are you ready for the darkness? Then close your eyes, but not all the way.